Welcome back to HQ. For the first time since 1967, the Ohio State University will make the long trip west to take on Oregon in Eugene. Two programs that rank in the top two in points per game differential, so keep your eye on the defense in this one. Will it be the freshman phenom Jeremiah Smith who continues to dazzle, or will Dillon Gabriel's crew find a way to slow down the Scarlet and Gray? It is kicking off at 7:30 Eastern over on the West Coast. From Ohio State to Pate State, let's bring in the host of the Josh Pate College Football Show, none other than Josh Pate. Josh, your tour is headed to that game at Autzen Stadium. It's a game we've been looking forward to really since the schedules were released, number 2 versus number 3. Give us the scouting report for the tour on this one.
It's beautiful. I mean, last year we went to Notre Dame when Ohio State went in there, and it was perfect. Low 70s, fall afternoon, and it was the red popping against the green, and it should look the same this Saturday. I've already checked, so you don't have to, Haley. We got low to mid 70s, high skies, maybe a passing cloud or two, but it's a conference game. Look at that B-roll. That stadium looks like a spaceship, so it should be pretty amazing. And then outside of the pageantry and the views and whatnot on the field, we find out if, let's say, Will Howard can keep up how sharp he's been in the red zone. We find out whether Dillon Gabriel can be precision in his passing performance against, by far, I think, the best secondary he'll face all year. Dan Lanning is a coach in need of those signature wins. Ryan Day is a coach in need of those signature wins. And I'll say this, it sounds disrespectful, but I think it is what it is. What the Michigan game has been for Ohio State the last few years, I think the Oregon game will be this year because they could play twice. Ooh,
okay. We'll get to that a little bit in the show. We call that a deep tease. For Ohio State, though, this is really the first true test that we've seen through the season. It's not really been a tough schedule. I like what you said yesterday, though, on Spotlight. Just because, you know, you're beating up on teams doesn't make you elite, and they have been elite up to this point. How do the Buckeyes, though, Josh, take the next step this weekend?
Yeah, look at that resume there. We have to be responsible about the way we talk about this because that doesn't prove you're elite, but having not played quality competition doesn't prove you're not. And there could have been a double negative somewhere in there, but my point stands. They are doing, Ohio State being they are doing what an elite team would do against the Akrons and Marshalls and Michigan States of the world. So then what we have to find out, as the pressure gets increased and as the quality of opponent elevates, not to mention you go on the road this week, what I look for whether that red zone efficiency continues. I look at that offensive line, especially on obvious passing downs, 3rd and 5 plus. I look at them at the tackle position. I look at how multiple and how talented and multiple Oregon's defensive front is and the different kind of pressures they can put and the looks and simulated pressures they can give to Will Howard. All that stuff determines whether it's Ohio State heading into the fourth quarter with 31 on the board or Ohio State heading into the fourth quarter with like 10 on the board, and it's a complete rock fight. Because, Haley, I got to be honest with you, I think this game stylistically could take on two wildly different looks based on how those quarterbacks react to respectively the best defenses they faced all year.
Yeah, Ohio State does have 4 straight losses against AP top 3 teams, which bodes well maybe for Oregon. And if we flip the switch and talk about that other side, we know Dillon Gabriel was the Heisman favorite coming into the season. He's now coming off his first game with 2 interceptions in 22 games. He currently sits 5th with the 5th shortest odds, that is, to win the trophy at plus 1,400. What do you need to see out of Gabriel this weekend and even as the season goes on to get him back into that Heisman conversation a little higher there?
Yeah, avoid the mistakes, which is much tougher. I think a lot of folks, since there was a win against Michigan State, they are willing to sort of etch-a-sketch erase those couple of interceptions you were talking about. They were not good. I mean, Milroe, you're looking at him on the board here. He had a tip ball up in the air that got intercepted against Vandy. That's a little bit different than what we saw Dillon Gabriel do against Michigan State last Friday night. So that's what I'm looking for. It's a tough ask to play your best game against the best competition. But if you're asking me about Heisman contenders instead of just pretty good quarterbacks, well, that's what you do. You elevate your game in the biggest moment. I mean, he is facing a secondary here that will not give him really big windows. And that's one of the things as you start to look towards the NFL conversation with Gabriel, his name won't be as high. And it's going to be because those physical attributes probably don't compute as well on the NFL level, but he's a great college quarterback. But against this caliber of defense, you got to be pinpoint, and it could be the kind of game, Haley, where we're mid-3rd quarter and we're texting each other, wow, Dillon's looked good so far. 2 or 3 bad decisions, 2 or 3 balls that are just off the mark equate into 10 points generated by Ohio State's defense, and that's the turning point in the game. So you got to be pinpoint, you got to be precision all afternoon.
Yeah, the margins right now, especially for quarterbacks in that Heisman race, are very, very tight. I will say it is Ashton Jeanty out of Boise State who leads the Heisman conversation right now at plus 220. Travis Hunter, second shortest at plus 320 there. So the Heisman race is going to be interesting. I want to stay on the betting theme here, though. Looking at the total here between Oregon and Ohio State, the spread, I should say, it's the Ducks that are home underdogs. For the first time, I believe, in 34 games that they are home underdogs in this one. But I mentioned it earlier, right? Ohio State has not played well against AP top 3 teams. So how does Oregon sort of partner that as motivation, right? You're at home underdog and you're facing a team that typically doesn't do well against teams that are ranked number 3.
I think you got to be careful with this, honestly. I think that if you need added motivation for this game, you're already in the wrong line of work. So I don't know that the motivational edge needs to be there. You can have that chip on your shoulder all you want to. You can have the prove it to the world mentality all you want to. I'm a believer that's not sustainable as a motivation source for a program, because once you get on top, it's not there anymore. Then what do you draw from? So I think Oregon, the things that Dan Lanning preached from the day he got there, the fundamentals, the values and principles of the organization, basically stuff that doesn't play well in a hype video because it sounds boring. That's the kind of stuff that carries you on a day like this. But then, Haley, it's also the kind of thing that carries you in a random sleepy afternoon against Wisconsin when you're favored by 17.5 and all of a sudden folks are trying to pull the upset on you in the third quarter. I do think that this spot and a couple of weeks ago, the Georgia at Bama spot were 2 that I was interested in the preseason because I had a pretty good idea Georgia would be favored in Tuscaloosa. We saw how that one turned out. And then part 2 was Ohio State will be favored at Oregon. We will see how that one turns out. And the other thing to note, it's still pretty early, but these Big Ten teams having to travel multiple time zones are not faring too well. And we got having to do it this week, and we got Ohio State having to do it this week.
Yeah, the travel schedule has just been tough, which was everyone's concern going into the season, was having to go across the country and who was going to do the best in those games. And that brings us all back to the deep tease I mentioned earlier, that Big Ten championship at the end of this season. When you look at the standings and how they've played out as it stands so far, we've got a 4-way tie at the top with 4 undefeated teams still leading the way. Both Ohio State and Oregon, of course, are a part of that group, but you can't count out Michigan, Josh. They lost to Washington over the weekend, but they're still the reigning national champs. All that being said, something you said earlier, we could be seeing this matchup, Ohio State versus Oregon, twice this year. Do you think there's a potential for it to be in the Big Ten championship game?
I do think so, and I feel a little bit different. I know we've mentioned the comparative analysis like 3 times already, but when Georgia played Bama a couple of weeks ago, you didn't necessarily have that vibe. Because unlike in the Big Ten, in the SEC, you don't have a solid top 2. Yeah, you got Bama, Georgia, but you also got Texas in the mix and Ole Miss in the mix and whatnot. But in the Big Ten, you said you're not going to count Michigan out. I am. So I've removed them from the equation. Penn State's the one that lurks to me. All due respect to the Indianas of the world. And I do mean all due respect. It's Penn State that lurks for me. And we will already know, Haley, the outcome of that Penn State-USC game by the time this one is concluded in Eugene late Saturday night. So there is not a finality by any stretch on the Big Ten championship picture, but I do think that we've whittled it down heavily and determined whether it's going to be 2 or 3 deep coming out of this one. But regardless of whether it is, yes, my overwhelming thought right now is this is round 1 of at least a 2-round fight between Oregon and Ohio State this year.
Ooh, I can't wait. The Big Ten championship game, by the way, on CBS December 7th. That is Josh Pate. He will be at this game in Eugene this weekend. Make sure you are up to date with all the latest in the college football world by listening to Josh Pate's College Football Show every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday live at 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube.